How you doing, everybody? Welcome to the NFL Brekkie Show, presented by the Next Gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day with the Next Gen Ford Everest. This handsome gentleman to my right is my good pal Laurie Horesh. I am Phil Murphy. Laws, we are back from our bye, and we have our eyes set certainly on the final third of the NFL season, which lies ahead, but also holding ourselves accountable a little bit from some topics we've discussed and some takes we've made in the season's infancy.
We know NFL chatter, punditry, sports media in general has become a hot take factory over the last decade in particular. And quite often you fire these things off, these early season proclamations, these instant, Monday morning quarterback overreactions in the great sport that is the National Football League. And there's not a lot of accountability there. They kind of fade off into the distance. They have their moment, and then we move on to what we're going to react to tomorrow or later this afternoon or at lunchtime while I'm waiting for my salami, ricotta, basil pesto, and fresh tomato sandwich panini to arrive. But nonetheless,
I counted 3 words in there that you and I say differently, by the way, whilst we're on the Brekkie Show. So continue.
But regardless of all that, what we want to do today is we want to take a look at some of our early claims this season. We had in week 1 and week 3, we had a couple of segments: who got hot, who came back from the summer, looking fit, looking firing. Now, I don't know that I came back from a week off looking fit and firing, but I did get a tan in Queensland, happily back in New South Wales, hence why Richard Cheekwee, great New South Wales cricketman, and an important member of the wider cricketing community in Sydney and Randwick, represented across the chest. I feel like I got a tan, maybe not a whole lot of gains being done, not a lot of time in the gym, but I'm feeling refreshed, and I wanted to look back. I wanted to take a look at who we said got hot over the summer. And additionally, on top of that, we had a segment there, when you're going to learn. Some of the learnings we thought we'd taken away from 3 weeks, grand narratives that we thought had been spun or confirmed. So that's what we're going to jump in right off the top. In a week 12 that saw a whole bunch of reveals, some moments where players rose to the occasion, and some where huge question marks loomed large. But look, Phil, let's get straight into it. We want all your questions today. If you've got takes from the start of the season, your own, or if you've got takes that you remember of ours that have aged shockingly and you'd like to bring them up, please fire away in the comment section. But let's, without further ado, let's fire it up. The hot take time machine. This is going to be a cross-examination, Phil. The hanging... that's cross-examination would be in the legal courtroom, so I'm mixing metaphors already, but imagine that swinging dusty light bulb on one time, or at one stage, it's going to be me looking at you, throwing some of yours back at you, and whether you can answer the call there. Then we're going to flip chairs, like you've just seen, your first episode of Heartbreak High, and you're in year 5, and Heartbreak High will need to get you to do some cultural education on that, Phil, but you're going to walk in, you're going to flip the chair around and sit it, cowboy style.
AC Slater style. Yes, I follow.
There you go. See, you guys had, not that we didn't have Nickelodeon back in the day, but that's what you had. You had your AC Slaters, and we had our Heartbreak High motifs. All right. So nonetheless, let's fire this up, Phil. You can send your first heat seeker at me, looking at some of these early claims that we had this season. What do you want to throw back in my face? And whether it's time for me to, eat some humble pie or take a lap of honor.
Laz, I am not taking off the gloves yet. I am starting with who got hot. And again, this was from week 1. And the when you're going to learn was from week 3 of the NFL season. So the season very much in its infancy. And there was this divergent path in the offseason. The Dolphins get a new head coach. Tua Tagovailoa gets some further weapons outside, continuing to bolster an offensive line. Is it enough for Tua to take the next stride? You said yes. You thought Tua Tagovailoa, after 1 week, got hot. And Laz, he still passes the eye test. As we sit here in week 12, in terms of shortest odds to win league MVP, he's number 3. I'll give you some of the names of guys behind him with longer odds for MVP. Josh Allen, who for a long time was the odds-on favorite. Joe Burrow, fresh off his Super Bowl run. Lamar Jackson. Laz, you had eyes for Tua in week 1, and here we are 11 weeks later. Still looking pretty hot to me.
Looking pretty hot and looking even hotter. And it's not just the physical appearance. It's
very little the physical appearance for the sake of the segment, but continue.
It's deep and meaningful as well. He had a quote that made its way around talking about what it meant for someone to believe in him, what it meant for Mike McDaniel to really show that belief in him and go from where he was casting doubt and looking in the mirror last season, previous campaigns, and especially with some of the coaching stuff, some of the noise he was hearing from outside of the facility as well as inside the facility, what it means to have someone actually have faith in you and allow you to see the good that you offer on the field and the good that you bring to the table in all manners, not just how you throw a ball left-handed, right way to do it. I say as an entirely biased left-handed sport. Well, we can't really say sportsman, but nonetheless, Tua has continued to blossom in a system that just fits. Well, that's what we looked at. It seemed to be in the offseason, coming in early in the season when we made these claims, it just felt right. Surround him with speed, invest a little more in the offensive line, get the ball out of his hand quickly, allow him to make quick, smart decisions, and let his natural accuracy and placement take hold, put those ridiculous offensive weapons around him, put them to use, allow them the space, the time to get the ball in their hands and then do extra damage. So, yeah, that's one I can take a lap of honor on, but it's one that continues to age really well, not just for in the singularity of Tua Tagovailoa in his career, but just how we look at quarterbacks. That might be one of my, in this season of parity and changing the guards, Brady and Rodgers going one way and young quarterbacks, we'll talk about some more later, coming up and rising through the ranks. That's one of the huge lessons I think we'll take away from the 2022 season, and that is we can no longer look at these signal callers, these gunslingers, these quarterbacks in their isolation. You have to take into account what you put around them, whether they're a Hall of Famer, future first ballot entry, no votes even need to be taken, or someone in the first 1, 2, 3 seasons in the league. You have to look at what is laid around them, the offensive line, the offensive system, the wide receiver talent, the running game, the defense as well, what positions are being put in, what game scripts are being put in. This is how we have to have these discussions about quarterback. Otherwise, we're just making ridiculous early season claims that obviously have no chance to succeed, and we'll get to some of those a little later.
Okay, Laz, I'll let you decide where am I getting interrogated. And by the way, we do see we have our clock running. We're about 7 minutes in, which means about 53 minutes left. We are not going to utilize the World Cup VAR system with 11 odd minutes of added time for no reason whatsoever. So if you have questions, get them in now. If you have comments or you want to remember a swing and a miss from one of our hot takes, mostly Laurie's, it's all fair game. So Laz, go ahead.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So you took a shot there, and I wasn't going to. You know, we're looking back here. Now, I could look back a little more recently, and, you know, we did a Super Bowl champion draft a couple of weeks ago. It was one of the last things we did before we had our bye week. Since then, your teams are 7-5. Since then, my team's 10-1. The only loss coming against one of my other teams.
My calendar says November. We're fine.
The Chargers. Anyway, we won't do that. You fired the first shot. I'll be nice. Who got hot? The wide receiver one in Philadelphia. You had a look at what had been invested, particularly with A.J. Brown arriving, and how we talked about wasn't just going to be what situation is A.J. Brown arriving in, but almost what situation is Jalen Hurts going to be returning to, and how a wide receiver could elevate a quarterback. That's certainly parcel is. So, Phil, how are you feeling about how the wide receiver one getting hot in Philadelphia? How has that aged over the last couple of months?
I would think quite well, Laz. I mean, we talked about it on draft night. In the interim, I talked about it on Sports Center, saying that I took the over for 998 receiving yards for A.J. Brown in his debut season. And that's a significant number because Philadelphia has not had a wide receiver eclipse 1,000 yards since 2014. I believe that was Sammy Watkins. So you go back to 2014, since they've gotten that level of production. Brown sitting here at 831 yards, 7 receiving touchdowns. I believe that puts him 8th or 9th amongst wide receivers in the NFL. It's shown maturation in Jalen Hurts. I was bullish on Hurts. Certainly did not expect him to be inserted in the MVP race, one spot above Tua. If we're looking at the shortest odds, Patrick Mahomes has the shortest odds because he has just hit an incendiary level. He's found another gear. But Jalen Hurts in this offense, he's the reason they're a one-loss team. And A.J. Brown, although a quieter night for him against the Packers yesterday, by and large, he has home run potential every time he touches the ball. Wide receiver one is looking good in Philly, and I would say more so than any other position aside from quarterback. If they lose A.J. Brown, that would be the biggest negative effect on their season. Their offensive line has the depth to manage an injury or two. Even if Miles Sanders goes down, they have capable understudies. If A.J. Brown goes down, it really compromises that RPO or even PRO threat from what you've seen from Jalen Hurts, where the first option is actually oftentimes a slant to either one of their interior receivers or Brown on a quick route and having him use his size to get 7 or 8 yards. If it's not there immediately, then they go to the run game. It's something we haven't seen in American football, really in earnest in like 40 years. The early 80s Nebraska Cornhusker teams that were amongst the gold, they were the Alabama of the early 1980s, with sending a number of guys to the NFL. So it's an innovative offense. He's the perfect fit for it. I feel terrific about that take.
Yeah, well, look, Tom is digging the shirt I'm offering, and I'm digging what you laid down there. I love the point you said there about the replaceability of someone like AJ Brown. If something does happen to AJ Brown, how that changes what defenses. Look, Philly have had their moments. Obviously, putting up huge score against the Packers yesterday, but have had their moments in recent weeks where the offense hasn't flowed as well as those early season statement games. But ridiculous consistency in terms of that offensive line production that lays the platform.
We see the get out of jail free card that Justin Jefferson and Stephon Diggs and those irrefutable A1 receivers can be for contending teams. AJ Brown fits that bill for the Eagles where, hey, it's 4th and 15. Maybe we chuck up a jump ball and he comes down with it.
Absolutely. And if he does depart the picture for any reason, if that were to happen, which touch wood it doesn't, because he's a phenomenal wide receiver specimen and thoroughly enjoyable football player to watch week in, week out. But think about how defenses can change their strategy and how they can change their game plan to hone in on all those things, all those different elements of their passing attack, and even the running threat, how they can administer even more resources to tackle the problem that is the dual threat potency of the Jalen Hurts plus running back plus offensive line conundrum that the Eagles possess. Okay, Phil, we've been nice. I know this is going to turn at some point. There's been a few friendly jabs thrown already. Come on, what do you got for me?
I'll go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And at the time, Loss, he was looking hot. And the week after, he was looking great in the GOAT versus GOT game, greatest of all time versus the greatest of today, Bucks, Chiefs, week 4. Helaire goes 14 carries, 92 yards, and a touchdown and a receiving TD. Loss, you're feeling pretty good. Coming out of the gates hot, hit early in the season, but much like your propaganda form, that of Clyde Edwards-Helaire around week 5 took a significant downturn. He has 1 touchdown since week 5 kicked off, and he's gone under 35 scrimmage yards all but 1 time. So as a bell cow type back that we thought he was establishing himself to be, now that backfield is getting very crowded. Isaiah Pacheco is showing his ability to do a lot of things that Tyreek Hill was able to do in space. And Laz, as of 4:30 U.S. time, Monday Arvo, 8:30 a.m. your time, Melvin Gordon, staying in the AFC West, has signed a free agent contract with the Chiefs, just getting that backfield all the more crowded. So there's no reason to believe that Edwards-Helaire's numbers are going to get any better. What happened?
No, I mean, health comes into it a bit, but obviously, look, form, it didn't continue. We mentioned they went into their kind of three-headed backfield there with McKinnon, especially on passing downs, Pacheco working in, and then, sadly, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the one to start making way. Even before his latest injury, the snap count had dwindled to almost nothing. The opportunities had gone away, and look, clearly, this was one that I got wrong. The Chiefs, in turn, in their draft capital expended on Clyde, they got that one wrong as well. And look, you're kidding yourself if you think this is anything other than Pack's world in that backfield. Yes, Melvin Gordon comes in. Perhaps there's some veteran insurance there. But I would think and I would hope to see that with the physical traits that Pacheco's shown, as well as his kind of increasingly professional vision and the seasoning that will come with more and more opportunities, you see he's becoming more potent the more opportunities you get. He's getting up to those 15, 16 carry type of game scripts, especially that the Chiefs are laying down for him. So as that continues to rise, I think this take continues to age poorly. And, sadly, for those that invested early and often in Clyde Edwards-Helaire stock during his time in Kansas City, this is one that is not going to age well in the portfolio.
All right, Laz, your final one, which we won't go into detail with, the Bills pass rush. They had 7 sacks in week 1 against the Rams, which you said the Bills pass rush got hot. That seems to be more of a byproduct of a very porous Rams offensive line. The Bills just 23 sacks since, a modest total, but it's basically the same pace they were at a year ago. So we'll give you a satisfactory grade there. With, again, the ultimate pass rush will be determined by their ability to generate pressure on quarterbacks in December and January, which is likely going to have to be without Von Miller.
Yeah, the Von Miller, huge cloud hangs over that point there. This one was I was watching an old episode of Friends trying to fall asleep the other night, and Joey presented with an opportunity that we won't go into detail there, initially responds with, yeah, baby, and then no, baby. And that's kind of how that take has aged for me. It looked great off the top there. Was flying in the Von Miller force multiplier that he seemed to be tearing off the edge, and how that impacted the other defensive linemen. Certainly seemed to be pointing to a huge skyward direction, but no, more no baby than yeah baby as that's gone on. Okay, time for me to turn it around. I have the option here to be nasty, but I'm going to be the big man here. Not in the gym or in the games. You've got me covered there. That's okay. But Saquon Barkley, Phil, you thought he had gotten hot. We won't touch. Your other claim was Michael Thomas. Again, a bit of an injury moot point there, so we're going to put that one to the side. No point spending time on that. But Saquon Barkley, you thought he got hot. We were going to see the best of him. And at this point of the season, and with, look, a winning record that has taken some shine, has been knocked off it recently. The Giants, as their kind of the reality of how they were performing versus what it said in the win-loss column started to kind of get closer and closer together. But Saquon Barkley, one of the unabashed success stories and revivals of this Giants campaign.
Yeah, I mean, Barkley and Thomas were betting on the same thing, that they would stay healthy. Michael Thomas hasn't seen the field since week 3, has not stayed healthy. Saquon Barkley, meanwhile, in this season, 3 of his 400-yard games have come since this take was offered, including the number 1 and number 2 career highs for his rush totals, which is very encouraging for somebody, if our concern is durability, that he's going over 30 carries a game when needed. And that's despite a quarterback who's proven to be quite mobile. Saquon Barkley sitting at 992 rush yards. We expected him to go over 1,000 against Dallas a few days ago, but Dallas completely kept him wrapped up. It's an inevitability that he'll get over 1,000. So I'll take that take as a win for one of the surprise teams this season. Okay, lads, we're about a quarter of the way through the show. Let's keep going. We had our hot takes as we get into our hot take time machine. From week 3, we revisited the when you gonna learn, and that is us basically doubling down on things that we thought we already knew. So I'm going to start and ask you, this one's going to require, I mean, you could stretch it. I'm going to disagree, but you were closer than I thought you would be. Trevor Lawrence, top 6 quarterback in the NFL, was your take after week 3. I feel like I can name 6 QBs better, but I can't name many more than that.
Well, the caveat that it was how it was going to age over the season, that we were going to get to the end of the season and he was going to be a top 6 quarterback. We are closer to the end of the season than we are the start of the season. But after his performance yesterday, particularly in the fourth quarter, and we're going to touch on that a little later without giving any spoilers away, I'm feeling the stock on that claim, the bandwagon for that type of claim is feeling pretty good. We're feeling the air conditioning's on. The drinks are being passed around. We're feeling like this is pointing in the right direction. Yes, you could rattle off 6 quarterbacks that currently, as of today, are still better NFL quarterbacks, even with the aging that we have seen from some of the biggest names and the veterans in that late 30s, early or mid 40s, I should say, category. So when it comes to Trevor Lawrence, though, we are seeing it all come together. The arm talent, the decision-making, what he is doing with average at best weapons at the wide receiver spot, at the tight end spot, the situational, not just situational awareness, but situational thriving that he has displayed. I think the Jaguars, I'm looking forward to having an ironclad, and we'll do it at the end of the season. We're going to have a look at our top 10 quarterback list and how it all lines up. I'm looking forward to see where he lands in that. But where we are at the end of the season, where we are going forward, that is one of the best 6 quarterback situations that fan base and honestly a front office can sit in right now and be happy about. If I'm a Jags fan, Jags coaching staff, Doug Peterson, who deserves his plaudits as well for building around and rebuilding after just a horrific, nightmarish opening season or first season in the NFL under Urban Meyer. They all should very well be sitting back comfy going, it doesn't get much better than this in terms of the most important position in the sport. And a lot of people over in the US like to say the most importantly toughest position in any sport. To have that locked in with a player that is ascending at this level, who quite frankly, there is not much he can't do on a football field. And we haven't seen him uncork his athleticism, which at this point is underrated compared to what he put down at college. I'm feeling pretty fine about the top 6 claim. I'm going to stick with it. I think, look, we've still got another couple months of this regular season. And I think a player of his ilk pointing in that direction, in the division that he's in, there's opportunity abounds to hammer home this and really be asking harder and harder questions of the NFL hierarchy come the end of week 18.
Yeah, still played the Titans twice. And you touched on the nightmarish, the absolute mare of a rookie season that he had. Andrew Wingard had some scathing remarks for the former coach, Urban Meyer, I believe hours ago after practice, and praising Trevor Lawrence, said that it's almost as if Trevor didn't have a rookie season going under Urban Meyer. He's a year 2 rookie this year, and you see the acceleration of his growth under center and his ability to lead this offense. Laz, we'll touch on it again in a moment. Coming into week 12, week 12, the Jags all time, when down by 7 or more in the final minute of regulation, 0-183. There's some decent quarterbacks there. I mean, Mark Brunell comes to mind in a very strong team in the late 90s. Never came back from 7 down to win. He did it, and like you said, it's going 11 of 14 when targeting Zay Jones, allowing those receivers to punch above their weight. So I do think I think this year might be a little premature, but with sustainability of Lawrence, if he replicates his form this year into next, then I think we'll be seeing him as a top 5, top 6 quarterback in the league.
With a Calvin Ridley arriving, you think about where Trevor Lawrence seems to exceed these beautiful 18, 20-yard throws that he just pierces to different points of the field. Now Calvin Ridley's, breaking ability, how he gets in and out of his cuts on routes to create those windows, match made in heaven, not to mention the draft capital that they'll have to go to work with as well. So all pointing, look, that was probably my most brazen take, and compared to some others that I've made over this season, I'm feeling pretty solid about that. Okay, flipping around, the chair has been swiveled around. I'm sitting there. What do we call that? Well, AC Slater style, heartbreak high style. Having a look at yours, Bears under 5.5 wins. They currently sit on 3 wins, but obviously injury has taken hold the last, especially in the last week there in Chicago, not to mention the offloading of talent that we saw around the trade deadline. Under 5.5 wins for the Chicago Bears. This was one of your big ones. How are you feeling about that ticket?
I feel terrific. And Laz, remember when I made that claim, the Bears were 2-1 on the season. They won in a quagmire against San Francisco in week 1. They pulled out another win. We've seen Justin Fields get this team on the right side of 30 points a few times. It's just the other team always seemed to find a way to get 3 or 4 more. Since this prediction was made, the Bears have gone 1-8. So unless they close out 3-2, this is going to be a win. This is going to hit at plus odds. I believe I got it at $2.20. Look at the Bears schedule. You say, yeah, they don't go on the road again till January 1st. It's late November. They're going to be playing in Chicago or on a bye until the 1st of January U.S. time. Obviously, 2nd of January if you're watching at your home in New South Wales or on the beach in Queensland. But the 3 home games are Green Bay, who is back up against the wall, unlike we have seen them under Aaron Rodgers. Philadelphia, on any given day, the best team in the league. And the Buffalo Bills looking to circle the wagon in a game with very significant consequence. The one thing I will say, if the Bears are able to, and I don't think they will, if they're able to split the next 4, there's a very real possibility they play the Vikings in week 18, where the Vikings should well have the division clinched up. Eagles have the tiebreaker over them in the NFC for the 1 seed. So there's a very realistic scenario where the Vikings rest starters. That might be a backdoor functional cover for the Bears, but it's going to take those kind of things to align. And again, them winning 2 of their next 4, they've won 3 of their first 12. So I feel very good about this.
I think you should too. I think this had the chance a couple of weeks ago to really start turning the other way. But those Bears games, and despite the draft capital that they've offloaded of late, those Bears games that were those 1-2 point losses, despite putting up big offensive totals, they were perfect. You saw everything that you wanted to start seeing from Justin Fields, his confidence, his explosive ability. Start to play out with more.
Except in the last 4 minutes.
Except in the last 4 minutes. And that's what, whether it was our colleague down here at ESPN Australia in the Sydney office, Darren Arthur, who is a tragic Bears fan, saying to me, Loz, what's going on? They can't get across the line. I said, Daz, this is what you want. You're seeing your most important talent and asset on the team and player persona in the locker room. You're seeing him emerge as one of the true game-breaking talents across the NFL, whilst not impacting whatever draft stock you have in a negative way. So that was.
And Darnell Mooney, as of today, out for the season. A very reliable receiving target for them. You got to
Less
ask at what
fun.
point do they pack it in and say, Justin Fields, I know you've been carrying injury all over the place, did not play in the loss to the Jets yesterday. At what point do they say, hey, we got to punt and look ahead to 2023 and not risk a injury of significance, to our gun quarterback who has shown at times the ability to carry a team. So I still, for all those reasons, I feel more and more confident about this as we discuss it further.
You should, whilst those invested in Justin Fields in fantasy should start to feel a little nervous, not just with the Mooney injury, but as you said, there is the possibility that at some point they decide to shut this down. Okay, Phil, what do you got for me now? We're being relatively nice so far. Surely there's a haymaker you've got to send my way.
Well, I mean, I can't say anything about Cliff Kingsbury won't last the season. If we were drafting not Super Bowl champions, but next coach to be fired, flip a coin between he and Nathaniel Hackett. If it weren't Hackett's first year in Denver, I would say he would have the shortest odds. Kingsbury has clearly lost the locker room. Those quotes from Kyler Murray were scathing yesterday. I think that's a knock on Murray's maturity, and I think that's a knock on Kingsbury's control of this locker room. If he does last the season, he will be gone on Black Monday, the day after the Week 18 finale on the second Sunday in January. So your other one, Laz, the Chargers should leave LA. Was your when you going to learn? The Chargers 2-3 at home, 4-2 on the road, just having won at the Toaster in the desert. Laz, if this trend holds, it'll be the third time in the last 5 years their road record has been better than their home record.
Look, part of this was about, just their place within that fan base, within that community in Los Angeles. And the other side was that this injury bug had seemed to follow them from San Diego and gotten worse. It had caught something and morphed and become some sort of awful hybridized injury, just not even a cloud. It's this thunderstorm that hangs over this franchise. And that's continued. They were playing without Keenan Allen and Mike Williams at the same time. Mike Williams has just re-injured himself again. They can't get healthy. They're waiting for the hopeful return of the likes of Joey Bosa. And they still have a winning record. They're still in the mix here. But yeah, I was sitting there, not in a city quite like San Diego, but in a quiet beachside town, thinking about what do we do with the Chargers. And I know the Golden State Warriors are based in the Bay, but the idea, could they become a California team? Could they become a roaming, as you mentioned, their road record often weighs positively against their home record. Could this be a team? Do we call them the Golden State Chargers? I don't know all the different monikers and different nicknames for the state of California, but could they become a traveling team that just gets out there to different communities? Obviously not in the NFL. The NFL is far too rigid for something like that. Yeah. But these are the things you wonder about a team that has great name, great quarterback, great talent, individual spots of talent, very likable, great color scheme, good jersey history.
Arguably the best in the NFL.
Yeah. And yet they don't have a true home, LA being what it is. And I wonder, could this be a transplant team? It wouldn't actually happen, but could we flesh this idea out where they are the traveling Chargers? They are road warriors, and we send them to different spots within the state of California, visiting Sacramento, who knows, and making home in different spots for a week and building their fan base that way, because the departure from San Diego was the stadium arguments and all that. It was infuriating, but you understood the frustrations, but you also felt for a local fan base that, this is so many people's second favorite team. Not you. You're an AFC West fan as it is with the Broncos. So many people, if they see this as a neutral contest, are leaning towards the Chargers, and yet their fate in this kind of mediocre geographical limbo without a true home. I'd love to solve it. And perhaps that's a way. Hey, look, if you're on the road the whole time, then the injury bug can't settle in one place for too long.
Well, it's an interesting concept. It's too extreme to function, but how it would work is right now in the NFL schedule, you get 9 or 8 home games. Oftentimes a neutral site game is taken from your home pool of 9. So you don't have you rarely have fewer than 8 home games. Their home game is in a shared stadium, SoFi Stadium, and there's no dispute when the Chargers play the Rams where the partisan support lies. Also no dispute when the Raiders come to town, or the Cowboys, or the 49ers. It is a decent-sized list. So the barnstorming area where, say they play back-to-back weeks in London, say they play 2 games up in San Francisco as the Golden State Chargers. Say they play 2 games at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Beautiful field, if you're not familiar. One of the most stunning venues in all of college football. Again, because it's perpetually 28 degrees. 2 at SoFi as a hat tip. The Minnesota Vikings actually used to do that. They used to play 2 games per year outdoors in Minnesota until it became completely untenable with weather. But they used to play 2 games per year, so there would be fans who would have season tickets for those 2 games. And now that they've changed and they play all their games at US Bank Stadium, those fans have their season tickets honored 2 Sundays per year. It's not completely without precedent, but it's going to take something that extreme for the Chargers to have any semblance of home field. So if you're one of those people who's like, man, I love the NFL, I don't have a squad. That's how I am in the NBA. I barrack for nobody. I don't have a team I support in the NBA. I've tried. Maybe this is the ultimate free agent, calling all fans, especially those internationally, in Australia, in London, in Mexico, priority markets, now Germany as well. Maybe put them at Allianz Arena for a game a year.
Oh.
Maybe the Bolts. They're no longer the LA Chargers. They're just the Chargers. Chargers FC. I don't think.
Well, someone needs to pick up the football team or the FC, suffix there in the NFL. Look, Phil, yeah, maybe we are dreaming a little too big. Maybe we are too far out there, too crazy a thought for a league, the Shield to consider. But look, it's clearly, from a fan standpoint, it's not working for the Chargers there. And with these bugaboos that hang around this team seemingly year in, year out, where we look on paper and we look at all the shiny names and we look at, at game management in the coaching staff, no, perhaps not ultimately heralded, but schematic knowledge has generally been respected with what they put out there, particularly from Brandon Stanley and the coaching tree he comes from. Anyway, let's move on while we're flying around there. Me thinking that the Chargers, just wondering which little quiet town could they call home in this week. We touched on the Jags enough there. So you thought the Jags could win the AFC South. It doesn't look like it's going to land there, but we spent enough time on the Jags already. The Bills to be a better suited team to close out games in 2022 than they were in 2021. High profile incident. Sorry?
It's a low bar.
It's a low bar. And precedent, precedent set in 2021, and look, a high profile instance of this. Obviously, what's going to come to mind there, Phil, is what happened against the Minnesota Vikings. But where do you feel? Yes, we can look at spark moments like a fumbled snap and stuff like that, but that's not really emblematic, and that doesn't really tell you a lot about the football operation itself. Looking at the Buffalo Bills, where they are, health of Josh Allen, where he's been, his decision making over the last month, combined with some of the other elements of the team that we've seen perhaps stand up, running game. How do you feel about them and how they're placed to win close games this season versus what we saw in a dramatic end to their 2021 campaign?
Marginally better, but only because it was so bad a year ago. But Laj, remember when I made that bold prediction, I was standing on the field at MetLife Stadium, Giants, Cowboys. I believe we did that show post-game as well. And as we were doing that show, and my hot take was not only would they be better, they would get their first single score win since 2020 the following week against the Ravens. And I'll be damned if they didn't do it. Coming back from 17 down, the Ravens, the first of several multi-score blown fourth quarter leads. That's been a real concern for them more than anybody. But since that tip was made, the Bills have played 6 one-score games. They're 4-2. They still need to get better. If I'm a Bills supporter and I'm thinking this is the year, this is the situation. Predictable rundowns, 3rd and 2, 2-down territory. How can we move the sticks aside from 5 wide and just hope Josh Allen can move the pile? But that's the best option. But that's not a sustainable option over the course of 4 quarters and over the course of 4 playoff games potentially. So I feel they are better suited, but I thought they were going to make more strides than they have. And they're going to be in some high stakes games down the stretch. That AFC East, it's AFC East or NFC East if we're talking deepest division in the NFL. The Bills are in for a fist fight to get that guaranteed home game and really have a chance at the road to the playoffs going through Buffalo. It's not a foregone conclusion like it is for Kansas City out in the AFC West to win their division. So the Bills have to get it done in these one-score games. They need to be better. They are better. They need to get better. And just if we're doing match play, by the way, I am making you make the putt still for the Jags winning the AFC South. It's a meter out. It's a very makeable putt. But the Jags sit here at 4-7, looking. They looked their best in the fourth quarter a week ago. The Titans are 7-4. They just threw away a close game. Next week, the Titans visit Philly. The Jags are likely to be road favorites in Detroit. Now we're talking a 2-game cushion with 2 head-to-heads left. So it's an uphill climb. I thought it was going to be closer than it was. I was thinking this would be a race to 9-8. Jags are going to likely need to get to 10 wins to do it, but it's not done yet. It's not looking good though.
No, and those, as you mentioned, those head-to-heads are huge in this. That can swing everything. But look, I think because we look back on some of our hot takes, we held ourselves accountable. We looked at some of these early season proclamations, but by and large, in a season where it has been hard to get a feel across the league, parity. I think we've come away. There was some solid predictive behavior there from us. I will also say that you mentioned the AFC and the NFC East. Did you know? I'm not sure if you saw. It's been mentioned. I don't know if anybody's thrown it out there on social media that the NFC East, if the regular season finished today, all 4 teams would be in the playoffs. The beast is back. The least is no more. Did anybody say that? Hey, you haven't seen it anyway, Phil? Not.
Well, I mean,
different Twitter accounts have posted it.
It's a dead horse that's taking strikes, but I don't fault it because remember, it was only 2 years ago that Washington, the football team, just needed 7 wins to win the division. Right now, 7 has you in last place through 12 weeks. So it is a dramatic turnaround. I am forgiving the over coverage of that angle.
Okay, we've just got, before we move on, because that is going to call time on the hot take time machine, we're going to put it away. We have a flurry of questions in. So let's go rapid fire before we get to our next segment, Phil. Questions and comments. Pat on the back here. Brad, friend of the show. Hey, fellas, love the T-Law take. I was with Laurie on this preseason. Also, chiming in there on one of your others, Phil. Is it weird I'm liking the direction of the Bills? Still a lot of the Bears, sorry. Still a lot of areas to improve, but I'm liking what they're doing. No, it's not weird there. This is strategic.
Not at all. If I had to trade the trajectory of my team, the Broncos, for Chicago, I would do it 11 times out of 10. You have, it seems, a franchise quarterback who has an issue that needs resolving. That's Philadelphia last year with Jalen Hurts. I'm not going to say the Bears are going to go in and win 10 of their first 11 games next season, but you seem to have the answer under center. You're in year 2 with a new GM, new head coach. Yeah, you gave away some defensive stars to get some draft capital. You gave up some of that capital to get Chase Claypool in town, but it seems like the Packers' best days are behind them. I don't trust the Lions yet. You tell me, Laz, if you told me next year the Bears are a 9 or 10 win team, depending how they draft and how they attack free agency, I'm not gonna shout you down. I can see it. So it's the rest of the season is going to be rough, but this is an investment. So this time next year, I think the Bears are going to be far better suited.
And attack is the right word for their free agency potential and capability, because they have the room to do some serious damage. And we'll get into free agency when we cross that bridge in the off season, because, Phil, we can't stay away. A few more here on the Chargers. This really touched a nerve here. Brad said Oakland Chargers has a nice ring to it. Tom threw out first. He said San Diego, but really he pivoted quickly and said send the Raiders back to Oakland, the Chargers back to San Diego, the Titans back to Houston, and while we're at it, Colts back to Baltimore. So Tom's feeling a certain way this morning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, the Tennessee Titans were the Tennessee Oilers for a year, and there's no oil in Tennessee. But there remain no lakes in LA, and the Lakers haven't changed their name since they moved from Minneapolis. So
there's a fine city out there that doesn't allow music either.
Salty
one
Lakes.
more. Just because we're feeling good and the positive vibes are so strong today, Phil, we're back. We're feeling refreshed. You're feeling the power of Thanksgiving meal coursing through you. I'm feeling the power of pina coladas and my first tan since before I became a father. Stu wants to know, how do the Broncos get out of this mess after giving up the house for Russ?
They turn the clock ahead to 2025, when I believe is their next first-round pick, aside from the one they acquired from the Dolphins. But I don't think that's going to be in the top 24 picks. That should not be a game changer. And the problem is, unless they make all-time significant year-over-year strides, they're going to be in the same situation next year. The Broncos are averaging 14.27 points per game. When you double decimal it, it's never a good sign. I double decimaled it because that would make them the lowest scoring team in the NFL for a full season since the 2000 Browns, who, remember, were reinstituted as a franchise in 1999. So we're talking year 2 of an expansion team That's the level of ineptitude that they're facing in Denver. Whilst the rest of the division, well, the other half of the division, LA and Kansas City, seem to have kept their level from a year ago. So the Broncos are in a world of trouble. It would not surprise me if Nathaniel Hackett were one and done. They don't have that luxury, though, with Russell Wilson. So short of finding a scheme in which he can work, that locker room is lost. We saw defensive linemen get very animated, very heated. He's become a punchline in the NFL. And these margins are close. Their defense is terrific. A lot of these games, Carolina is the exception. A lot of these games are 3, 4, 7-point games. The problem is there is no confidence in that locker room when Russell Wilson's under center with a chance to tie. Denver's biggest second-half comeback this season is 5 points. They were down 10-5 to San Francisco, and a pair of field goals, a touchdown, failed 2-point conversion, gave them an 11-10 win. That is the pinnacle of the season. It is tough sledding. Thank you for striking that quote.
At least the other name you guys were linked with, your beloved Broncos were linked with in the offseason in Aaron Rodgers and his $50 million a year contract. At least that.
Yeah, this is a marginally cheaper failure.
Yeah, at least that's not aging gloriously in contrast. That might be one of my favorite flurry of comments and questions we've had this season. The run that came in there was exactly what we're about. It's exactly why we're here almost every Tuesday throughout the Tuesday morning my time, Monday evening Phil's time during the regular season, and then we'll absolutely kick it into even higher gear throughout the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. But that's what makes it so fun. So please keep those comments coming in. We're going to move forward now. That was a negative, Phil. We will move to a positive now. We will keep it positive. As I said, it's the good vibes are flowing today. The sun is out. It's T-shirt weather here. It's always T-shirt weather for you. Let's get to our tag team champs, Phil, as I remove some of the comments we have here. Our NFL tag team champions of the world, of the week, of week 12. And Phil, where else could we go here? Where else than with White Lightning striking once again with the New York Jets?
And White Lightning does sound like a short-lived 80s tag team adjustment that had a quick championship run. Now, if I'm the Jets, I'm liking what I'm seeing between Mike White and Garrett Wilson. What were you going to weigh in there, Loss?
What intro song, and I'll ask this to anybody for the folks watching out there as well, White Lightning tag team during the 80s. I imagine there's some silver, blue tights. What intro song are we doing there? Is it something off Ride the Lightning from Metallica? Is it something a little more glam hair metal-y than that was more, that's more we're getting into the kind of speed thrash areas there with Metallica? What track are you turning to? It's not Lightning, but is it Thunderstruck? And is that a copyright issue? Are you paying out some big royalties there? What are we doing?
Man, Laws, any real hair metal? Maybe Jefferson Starship Ride the Tiger has potential. It just feels apropos. It's one of those. You can envisage this. But our tag team champions of the world of the week, Mike White and Garrett Wilson. Zach Wilson played himself and talked himself out of the starting lineup, and I feel bad for him because he was asked a bad question, but he also handled it very poorly. As the quarterback, you're functionally the COO, whereas the coach is the CEO, and the COO didn't win over the harshest media environment that we have to offer. So in steps Mike White, who some people call here White Mike. He looks like the default creative player in Madden 23, but he can sling it, man. 2 times in 4 career starts, he's gone over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Twice in 4 career starts. Zach Wilson has never done that. And you look at Garrett Wilson in particular, the first round pick, as the Jets had an awesome draft. Sauce Gardner, they got Breece Hall. Hope he gets well soon and early in the second round. Jermaine Johnson back into the first round, but Garrett Wilson, as I believe the first receiver off the board, he was averaging 5.4 targets per game and no touchdowns in Zach Wilson's starts. When anybody else starts, he has all 4 of his touchdowns this season, and his targets per game go up nearly 3 to 8.2 targets per game. And this is indicative of all the receiving targets for Mike White when he's targeting wide receivers in that 31-10 win over the Bears. 10 completions, 183 yards on 15 targets, all 3 of his touchdowns. Zach Wilson has 1 touchdown to any receiver this season. And Laz, Dan Orlovsky broke me with this in that when he broke down Mike White's tape compared to Zach Wilson, the fluidity with which White is able to go through his progressions, feet matching the eyes, no hitch, and not taking high-risk throws. Trusting if receiver 1 isn't open, bam, bam, bam. He can get through 4 progressions in 2 seconds, get the ball out of his hand, and trust an Elijah Moore or Michael Carter or somebody to go get yards after the catch. It is such a fluid operation, and it's somebody who was one of these prolific collegiate passers at Western Kentucky, and we thought, okay, not a major conference, Conference USA, how's that going to translate to the NFL? So far, quite well. And I'm not donning him the next Tom Brady, but I am donning him a more capable starter today for a team that has very realistic playoff aspirations. There will be mutiny at MetLife if Zach Wilson is reinstituted as starter.
You mentioned him coming out of college there, and what a prospect he was in that draft class, in that quarterback class. He was looked at, is there someone out of the, you need heavyweight names at the top? Is there someone in the mid-round, someone who could emerge as a starter? And Mike White was a really trendy name. Goes to the Dallas Cowboys, and it doesn't really happen there. They obviously have some presence there in the quarterback locker room. And also, you can look at the brains trust, the offensive brains trust that was there at the time, and ask whether that was the best environment for developing a young quarterback. But he does land here, and it's easy to throw in something like, hey, look, he even got Elijah Moore going after just what's been such a deflating and disappointing season for Elijah Moore after how he burst onto the scene last season. But have a look at the touchdown to Elijah Moore, and it'll tell you more than just a wide open receiver and not the most difficult throw, but in the reverse angle, you can see directly into Mike White's eyes. And as you said, he's going through the reads. He's making a good decision, quickly, good process, good fundamentals. It's not just results-based analysis. It's process-based analysis that did lead to good results in this instance. So then working with someone like Garrett Wilson, who has, I think the best way I can describe him, he has this bounding athleticism. He's so springy in the way he makes cuts and then starts to gallop. He's got the 4.38 speed. He seems to play bigger than someone who's listed just a shade under 6 feet tall. That type of connection, just putting players in position to succeed there, letting him get out there in the intermediate level and break someone's ankles and then sprint away with that gorgeous open field fluidity that he possesses there. 95 yards and a couple of touchdowns for Wilson. And you're seeing, you mentioned the targets there. He's getting a 27% target share in this game. That is exactly what we want to be seeing. Give your undeniable high-end premium talent on the roster, give them the opportunities to go and break the game open for you, go and get victories for you. All this surrounds a quarterback who's working within the system with the offensive brains trust on the sideline there and the talent around him to all in all put that whole unit in position to succeed. So deserving tag team champions. We are seeing a few more. Brad coming in with a little comment there. Drake London went 8, Garrett Wilson went 10. There was a mistake made there. I don't know. That top of the list there, that was definitely a 30, what do they say? There's 30, 31, 32 different flavors of ice cream at Baskin Robbins, whatever
31.
it is. 31. There you go. Just different flavors of ice cream there, depending how you wanted to see it fit. But look, deserving tag champions this week. Refreshing for a Jets franchise that has had so much positive in the early part of the season, then stuck in quarterback controversy. And look, the worst thing a team can do is double down on a bad decision. Right now, it is a situation of, we're hearing, this isn't the end of Zach Wilson's career in New York, and that he'll have a chance to rebuild and work on his issues and his flaws and come back and challenge and have a crack at earning back his starting quarterback job. But quite simply, and I mean it simply, Robert Saleh put it best, Mike White made the easy look easy. And that's one of the best, underrated, but best things a quarterback can do.
I mean, if you have the availability to look at all 22 tape or even just some of the highlights of the game where you can see him throw beyond the first target, there were times that there were makeable throws that he passed over because they were high-risk throws and in a period in which you don't want to make a high-risk throw. 2nd and 1, plus territory. You have Garrett Wilson, on the single coverage with a safety that's a little late to get over. We don't need to make that throw late in the third quarter when the game's in hand. And he's making that decision pre-snap even. If it's not glaring, I'm going to go to the middle of the field and then go to my tight end who's on like a little bit of a delay block release and then check down to Michael Carter. And it's processing so fast that it's masking any offensive line issues that there might be. And I think you said it perfectly. Made the easy look easy. And that is not a universal trait in the NFL. Everybody wants to be the hero and have the Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, oh my gosh, how did he make those throws? But you have a quarterback who went 4 for 4 with 2 touchdowns, throwing it more than 15 yards. So when he took his shots, they were makeable shots. And that's for 4 for 4 for 147 yards. Zach Wilson in that same scenario all season, 0 touchdowns, 3 picks, and hasn't thrown a touchdown of over 15 air yards in 16 games. So even when the high stakes throws are there, Mike White's doing it at a much more reliable rate, which in a division where you have some talent in secondaries and people are keen to try and take chances and perhaps turn the ball over. We saw that cost Josh Allen against Minnesota. Mike White seems okay with the marginally more confident throw, maintaining possession of the ball and trusting the offense to keep moving down the field. It's very encouraging to watch.
All right. While we stick with encouragement, as I mentioned, the sun's shining today. Well, at least in Sydney it is.
Not in Naptown at the moment.
We are going to continue to hand out honors, Phil, and I'm going to throw it over for you to launch this one off. But there was a name that has come up over and over again, and deservingly, we're going to give him a little spotlight here with one of our weekly specials, Phil.
Yes, Laz, this is the Next Gen, brought to you by the Next Gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day with the Next Gen Ford Everest. And when Laurie and I assess the play of some players, reflexively I look at the rookie class so that perhaps I don't forget that Garrett Wilson was the second receiver off the board, although he should have been the first before Drake London. No, we look at rookies and guys who are completely new to the game. But Trevor Lawrence is a functional year 1.5 player because of the utter dumpster fire into which he was drafted, with Urban Meyer leading, if you can say that word, the Jags last season. In comes the far more capable Doug Peterson, has his locker room believing. And listen, Trevor Lawrence has had his early season downs, but man, when this game was on the line against the Ravens, and I mentioned margins are gone, the margin for error is gone for Jacksonville. If they're going to have any sniff of a division or a backdoor playoff berth for that last seed, it is win now and win always. And man, Laws, a close game, 9-point deficit in the fourth quarter. Lawrence, 15 of 19 passing in the fourth quarter, 173 yards, 2 touchdowns. That includes the game winner with 14 seconds left. That includes the go for 2 in the win. That includes a situation in which the Jags were 0-183 in the history of Jacksonville football, went down 7 or more in the final minutes. No dramas. We got T-Law. We saw that kind of galvanizing spirit in Joe Burrow last year take the Bengals to the brink of the Super Bowl. At the 2-minute warning, they were fitting themselves for a ring. And Laws, when he was targeting wide receivers, this wasn't all checkdowns. 23 completions on 30 targets to receivers for 250 yards and his 2 touchdowns. I already mentioned 11 of 14 when he was targeting Zay Jones. Finding ability to have his skill position players punch above their weight class. So now that when people see those blonde locks in that huddle, there is a sense of belief that you can't fake. And that's why Trevor Lawrence gets honored with our Next Gen Player of the Week.
It's a good time to be sunshine. Look, what we saw from Trevor Lawrence this week was a culmination of the encouraging bits and pieces that have been building and building steadily throughout this season, as you mentioned, with the grown-up in the room, with Doug Peterson there as your head coach compared to what he was dealing with last season. Trevor Lawrence's ability in this game to get into chess matches against players like Marcus Peters, playing cornerback for the Baltimore Ravens, taking them on in spots where he knew he had an advantage. You mentioned the work he did with wide receivers there, but we're seeing big plays from the likes of Jamal Agnew. Throughout this season, we've seen the likes of Evan Ingram come to the fore. This was, for Trevor Lawrence, what he is built of, the physical skill set that he has, the mental grace and calm that he operates with, the way he can go through his reads, the decision-making. This is all building to a new tier of performance for him. It is all culminating. I can use a whole bunch of different words, but what we're saying is it's coming together. He's been put in a situation. What we saw, I was thinking about this narrative with Doug Peterson coming in. This feels like a movie you might catch on, a platform like Disney Plus, but it feels like, a coming of age school movie where there's been, it's a downtrodden school. They've had awful teachers. And then in comes this guy who's, is he a substitute teacher? He's here to stand in for how long? We're not exactly sure, in Doug Peterson playing that role. Grizzly, but with some success in his background. Why did he leave his last school? Everything was going so well. What was the controversy? He left in shady circumstances, backroom dealings and the power mechanics of wherever he came from. question marks about it, but he comes in and he connects with a roster and provides them an actual foundation to build upon. Trevor Lawrence for the month of November, no interceptions, 6 touchdowns. He's completing at 77% of his passes. I mean, this guy is playing at that level of football, 815 yards total. So it's not all checkdowns, as you mentioned. He's working with the talent that he has around him, which is not what the Cincinnati Bengals has. It's not what the Philadelphia Eagles. It is not one of the best wide receiver cores or receiving cores in the NFL, but the level to which he has rebuilt the trajectory of his career this season. And now, as we get into week 12 with Ford Everest next gen honors, he truly is the next generation of quarterback. He is going to be one of those names, along with the Justin Fields of the world, that is going to emerge on. We've had the Rodgers and Brady tier, then we have the kind of the Russell Wilsons, the Dak Prescotts of the world, and now we're into this new era that's coming through. And what I get excited about, I mentioned it earlier in the show, is there's still untapped potential here, not just with what you can elevate around him in terms of skill position talent, but then we can start talking about his mobility. And once he has taken this type of performance, made it more consistent, and then can threaten with his legs and with his physicality as a runner, the ceiling is the roof. It doesn't matter what the ceiling is. There is no ceiling for a talent like Trevor Lawrence and where he can take his game. So a very deserving honoree for week 12.
Yeah, Laz. I mean, he's not the Patrick Mahomes comparisons are limited by the Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy scheme. All due respect to Doug Peterson, that's the scheme and the skill positions in Jacksonville aren't the same, but the confidence instilled, being a desirable free agency destination, and it even gets to the point that Florida, in which Jacksonville resides, is amongst the most tax-friendly states in the United States. So if I'm somebody who's being paid $10, $12 million a year, and I get to keep 10% more of my money or 12% more of my money going to Florida vis-a-vis California or New York or Minnesota, to name a few, it's an appealing place to go in a winnable division, and it's really changed the opinion of Jacksonville football. And I do think they are able to go on a run, and I'm not giving up on them just yet, because I loved what I saw yesterday. I was like everybody else, against the ropes. Here we go. Maybe it's time that we do what the Bears do and just look ahead till next season. Trevor Lawrence said not so fast. Again, 15 of 19 in the fourth quarter. And the biggest honor of all, beyond coming back to beat the Ravens, beyond getting a franchise first, Trevor Lawrence is our next gen player of the week, brought to you by Ford. Conquer every day in the next gen Ford Everest. Well, Oz, while we're talking about conquering, do you have something you wanted to add?
I want to say, look, I know where we're going to here, and you can look at the bottom third there, and I've completely stepped on your segue there, but that's all right, because I mentioned before that the flow of comments we were getting today was some of our finest of the season. Just checking in and on Twitter, and they're flowing in some more, and people are really enjoying the accountability that we showed early in the show, Phil, where we looked at some of our best and worst. So I just wanted to share a couple that we had fly in recent minutes. From Nick at White Boy Pacino, Russell Wilson would be Denver's savior was my worst take, and the Jets nailed the draft, notwithstanding the running back injury. Best take. And look, you can still nail the draft while the talent gets injured. What we have in Breece Hall coming back in 2023.
The draft is a 4 or 5 year window, and year one returns are very good.
Peter Hooley, notable Australian basketball and NBL voice, and an ESPN colleague. Best, the Giants will win the Super Bowl. Worst, the Giants won't win the Super Bowl. Hools is showing his Big Apple-based colors there, and I may have had some words about this to him in the DMs before. And Nikki P, the best, the Cardinals are still not good. The worst, just the Rams in general, which really, that's about, it's the worst timeline for the Rams.
Who among us wouldn't let our franchise sell their souls in the draft for a coach that we know isn't gonna ride out his contract, to say we get a Super Bowl, we get the experience of it, and then we'll figure out after that. Because the Lions hold their first round pick, which is looking like a top 5 selection at the moment next year. It's not looking good for the Rams at the moment, but they got what they set out to do. All in for a Super Bowl, great. We collect our chips, and then I don't know. I think that's where the analogy dies, because normally when you go all in and you hit, you have a big stack. It's like they paid for that Super Bowl, and they're paying for it now. And it could be the last year. Aaron Donald flirted with retirement. This could be his last season. Matthew Stafford's on his way. It could be dark days for the next few years for the Rams, but they got what they set out to get.
Big questions surrounding the Rams. No big questions from friend of the show and industry friend Drew Jones, who just wanted to weigh in and say a couple of big units here, which is a nice way after stepping on your segue earlier. A nice way talking about units to segue into our final segment of the day, Phil. We're at the 59-minute mark. We've got to get out of here soon, but let's get some propaganda going.
Yeah, Laz, we'll put 8 minutes of stoppage time up on the board because there was a throw-in or something, and the U.S. is up a goal, and we need to find a way to fix that. As I'm worried about tomorrow, man. Mm-hmm. Propagander, Laz. I don't want to pile on you because you are positive for the season, and the goal with any kind of wagering, please gamble responsibly, is positive return. And to your credit, through 10 weeks of wagering and a bye week, you're up 0.39 units. So if that were a standard unit, $10, that means over the course of 10 weeks, you'd be up a total of $3.90, which if you keep that current pace, a 4-20 meat pie is not too far away for you, my friend. That's just my maths behind it. So conversely, if we're going to compare, I am at plus 0.392 units, a lead of 3.63 units. Using our $10 wager, that's $36.30. Has not been the case since week 2, but Laz had a 5-unit margin from a long shot hit, and we kept our composure, much like the Giants went down 10. You know what you are. Keep handing the ball to Saquon Barkley, little zone read with Daniel Jones, pick up positive yardage. It's a 4-quarter game, man. You get some extra time.
Did you watch what happened on Thanksgiving, Philip?
What's that?
Did you watch what happened on Thanksgiving, Philip?
I mean, listen, the analogy is a product of the entire season. I missed both my picks last week, although we didn't make any for the show, but I will share I was 0 for 2 on my Monday Night Football, Tuesday Arvo propaganda. But you and I agreed to a bye week. So
I can confess that I was 2 for 2 on morning mojitos for my picks for Monday Night Football last week.
But the important thing is the last time we did this officially was week 10. And in those, I was 2 for 2. Jalen Hurts under 29.5 pass attempts at $1.88. Terry McLaurin over 4.5 receptions, which he hit by halftime. And by the way, Jalen Hurts, I've had a lot of success picking unders on his pass attempts. Even yesterday, I took under 28.5. He was at 18 at halftime, finished bang on 28, the under hit. So again, this is not the pile on Laws. He is facing an avalanche of prognostication. So it's a difficult thing with which to keep pace. He is positive on the year, so you can feel confident responsibly backing his tips. That said, Laws, I believe I have honors because I won the last time we did this. I'm up on the year. So my first pick, and I do expect this game to be a bit of a slog in spurts. I believe it's going to be much like the last 2 Colts games we've seen with Jeff Saturday as head coach, establishing the run, trying to shorten the game, limit big plays on the other side. So I'm leaning unders on most of my tips, except Paris Campbell. For whatever reason, in this 2-game sample size under Jeff Saturday, he has had 2 of his 3 most prolific receiving yards totals, and Paris got to Les Maisons 2 weeks ago. That's French for house, Laws. So his market is set at over 46.5 receiving yards. Pays $1.91 here, a little juice on the under. I'm going to go to the alternate receiving yard total. Whilst we were chatting, I had a little punterino, a little punterooski. I got him at $2.10 to go 50 or over. So functionally over 49.5. Receiving yards for Paris Campbell, $2.10. That's 4 or 5 completions or 1 sizable completion. And we're there. That's my first tip.
All right. Well, in the interest of brevity, and you have the honor, I'm going to double dip really quickly here because mine are very related. We've seen the running game return under Jeff Saturday. I don't think that we're going to see them put a player like Matt Ryan behind an offensive line that's had its issues and allow some of that returning and resurgent defensive line for the Pittsburgh Steelers to tee off. I think they're going to lean towards Jonathan Taylor here. So I've got Jonathan Taylor over 19.5 attempts. The number has been 22 the last 2 weeks for him. You're getting that one at about $1.79. So you're giving away a little bit there. Again, gamble responsibly if you're going to have a punt. But I think that leans towards the game script that we're going to try and see the Colts establish here, take the air out of the ball, lean on a resurgent running game. And to that point, Matt Ryan, under 31 and a half pass attempts. He's been short of that number quite frequently over the past month. Past kind of 4 or 5 starts. Obviously, there's some interruption there with the bizarre quarterback change that we saw in Indianapolis as tumult took over the franchise. But I see him going under that, again, playing into what I expect the Colts are trying to establish in this game. And he getting that at about $1.88 either way. I'm going the under on that one. But that's how I see this one playing out. Again, as you and me have said, the times that we've been kind of we've kind of felt like we had a really good feel about how the gameplay was going to unfold on Monday Night Football. Usually went the other way. Low scoring predictions, high scoring affair. But that's where I see this one going. Those 2 Ps in a pod and hopefully get me back in some winning form, Phil.
Yeah, I won't do the math on a multi there because we have a show to conclude. But Laz, I do think that 4-20 meat pie is even nearer than I may have suggested for you to get up the requisite 0.42 units on a $10 wager. So you're right around the corner. My second tip, I was tempted to pull a Laurie and have a lead and get aggressive. There is a market in which I put down 0.75 units, we'll say, on Najee Harris or Jonathan Taylor to score the game's first touchdown at $3. I normally hate touchdown markets, but these teams have both struggled in the red zone, and those are both terrific red zone options, especially early in the game. Similarly, I like the Matt Ryan pick. There's a market for Kenny Pickett to go under 32.5 for his longest completion, under 32.5 yards. I expect the Colts to try and limit big plays. That pays $1.88, but Laz, I wanted a little bit more return. So I'm going Najee Harris under 17.5 carries at $1.98. There's juice on the over here, but like you, I do think the Colts are going to be up late in this game. It's going to have Najee Harris touching the ball out of the backfield. I just don't necessarily think it's going to be on 18 to 20 designed runs. Now, he has hit 20 each of the last 2 weeks. That must be said. But those are 2 of just 3 times all season that he's gone over 20. It's not like they're coming off a bye and fresh legs. So I do think make it a little more creative. Jeff Saturday and that coaching staff looking at recent tape and saying, we're going to take away the electric second-year running back, Najee Harris. So I do think he'll be more in that 14 or 15 range at $1.98. I do think it is terrific value. Take the under on Najee Harris, under 17.5 rushing attempts. And if you do have a punt, can't overstate it. Please do so responsibly.
Well, what I really took away from that was that, having a lead and getting aggressive, being called, being dubbed pulling a Laurie is about the nicest iteration and version of pulling a Laurie that I've heard over my 30-something years on this blue and green old planet. So thank you, Phil, because I've heard far worse incarnations and versions of that, and I'll take that. Get a lead, stay aggressive, pull a Laurie.
Listen, we have now a 3.63 unit advantage. Now it's too early in the game to pack it in because we don't share our tips for the show. You could come out here and say, you pick your defensive line. Yannick Ngakoue is going to get an interception at $12. I got to deal with that stress while I'm standing on the sideline, giving game updates. But Laz, it's I would reckon that we'll hit 3 of these 4. And you could hit 2. As we've established, you are due. You are overdue to get some wins in this competition. But with that, and having reached our near 8 minutes of stoppage time, we want to thank you for watching the NFL Brekkie Show, presented by the Next Gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day in the Next Gen Ford Everest. And again, we are counting down the hours to kickoff. 1:15 if you're watching in New South Wales or Melbourne. It's a little later in the afternoon if you're watching in Auckland. Certainly a lot earlier or mid-morning if you're watching in Perth. And I can't do the math on places like Queensland and Northern Territory that don't change their clocks. So just look at local listings, check out your Foxtel or KO or whatever. But anyway, he is Laurie Horesh. I am Phil Murphy. Colts v Steelers. I will see you on the sidelines. And again, for all news across the world of the NFL, keep it on ESPN Australia's NFL page. Thank you guys for watching as always.